panel. My name is Fabio Veiga. I'm a professor in Portugal, Guseva University, and president of EcoJustice. And we are in Krakow, in the Ignatian University. Speaker em português for my colleagues in Brazil e em Portugal. Estamos aqui na Universidade Ignatian, em Cracóvia, na Polônia, e nós vamos fazer agora a abertura do segundo painel que tem como convidados 3 professores, né, um de Portugal, um do Brasil e outro aqui da Polônia, e passarei a apresentá-los, cada professor. Cada um tem direito a 20 minutos, e depois vamos dar um tempinho para debate. Okay, now we start. Professor João Proença Xavier from the University of Salamanca, Spain, professor in Portugal and Spain. Your theme is climate changes and human rights. Welcome, Professor João Proença Xavier.
So, thank you very much, dear Fabio Veiga. I want to welcome you all to this Ignatian University of Krakow, where I was and I am for the first time. I congratulate the Professor Marcin Piętnek and Mario Zaluki, my dear friend, and last but not least, the invitation of my dear colleague of scientific partners and President of EcoJustice, dear friend of long time, Fabio Veiga. So, before counting up, I want to offer my latest book about surrogacy in Portugal. Okay. In Portugal, Spain, and in Brazil. It is in Spanish and in Portuguese. Sorry, but it is my honor to give to Professor Marcin my latest book for putting to our university library.
Thank you very much.
I think it is. Thank you very much. I think it is the only book of this. This book is representative of surrogacy in Portugal, Spain, and in Brazil, and it's sponsored by Foundation of Science and Technology of Portugal and the University of Salamanca. So it's my small addition for your kind of university, and I hope I can bring more when I came and be a lecturer here the next semester. I hope. If you can.
Thank you very much, Professor. And honestly, this problem seems to be. Thank you very much, Professor. I will run up the stairs, by the way, to deliver the batteries to the microphone. Sorry for this technical break. But the book is dedicated to the problem of surrogacy, and I presume it's of the utmost importance, especially when you think about societies getting more and more getting older and older. So when you think about the birth rates, which are decreasing, when you think about all these struggles for having children, for people who are slightly older than the others, and maybe made problematic choices being younger. So it's a very important issue on the borderline of law, ethics, and humanities. So I do appreciate your gift, and thank you. I'll deliver it to the library.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your kindness. Perhaps I will bring several other reflections to you. So now, counting for my presentation, I'll do it disruptively. So I'm speaking English, and for the first time in my life, 18 times in Poland. I will speak also in Portuguese for our audience in Brazil that cannot understand me so much. So I have here a full article with 7 chapters that I briefly comment, because this is a teaser for reading out all about it in our joint book that will be printed from EcoJustice and this University of Poland. So I have chapters about the Portuguese issues of environment, climate alterations, base law for climate alterations also from Portugal and Spain, eco-citizenship, environment and human rights, Jurisprudence from the European Court of Human Rights in or on environment law, environmental law, and the European Union and climate change. So for that reason, I will begin to speak in English, then I turn to Portuguese, and then I will finish as I should in English. Thank you all for your presence. Climate change and human rights. Climate change has been talked about for many years, and in this research, we are going to talk about how close climate change and human rights are two topics not so close as should be, but not so far apart as I see them. As it is possible to observe, the changes are increasingly strong, affecting the life of thousands of people with heavy rains, large fires, and even human rights are affected everywhere. But today, these changes are smaller than when we find it to be in 10 or 15 years from now, where that we observe that in the near future, you will have a major problem related to the quality of life and health of the entire world population due to all the acts already practiced in the past and many more that are being practiced in the future that are entirely responsible for the changing of humans right now and the humans that are not even born yet. So for these reasons, we have international treaties that should be respected in their entirely demanding laws, and not just for the state to take part of it and to punish everyone. But the population to be aware and respect the entire environment is needed by themselves culturally. As the professor from the University of Stanford in USA has said before, we need to have public policies and we have to leave something to the state to rely on, but we must rely on the culture of the population. So we must have climate change as a topic on our schools, and you must put human rights as a base, as a legal, ethical base for thinking them through. So in Portugal, it is possible to observe a great concern with the environment and with the quality of life of the entire population. The state sets great goals for no less than 10 years to start reaping good results for everything. So next 10 years will be crucial in human rights and climate change to break the tendency of ruining our lives ourselves. Really, human rights are treated in conjunction with environmental law. And however, we will show that there is a very close relationship between the two rights, since there are no healthy people in a sick environment. We understand that the countries of the European Union will be the least polluted, as I see it, in the coming years, as the entire bloc has this concern, in addition to culture that exists, and leaving your car home is just a small step. So perhaps you should do like in Poland, using public transportation, go by bike, have great parks, and have cultural and family activities done there that instruct our children to be protective of the environment in the future. So I will go right now to Portuguese. Sorry for our fellows from Poland, but I think they will seem interesting to try to connect a little bit with my Portuguese accent. As alterações climáticas e os direitos humanos. Há muitos anos que se fala de alterações climáticas. Na breve pesquisa que aqui trazemos, nesta reflexão, vimos falar de que, quanto as alterações climáticas e os direitos humanos estão próximos, na realidade, não estão tão próximos como deviam, mas também parecem estar mais afastados do que na realidade estão. Porque, como é possível observar, as alterações climáticas são cada vez mais fortes, afetando a vida de milhares de pessoas, com fortes chuvas, grandes queimadas e incêndios, e até mesmo os direitos humanos internacionais estão afetados inequivocamente. Porém, hoje em dia, essas alterações são ainda menores do que prevemos que vamos encontrar daqui a 10 ou 15 anos. É uma perspectiva de que, infelizmente, vai piorar. Observamos que, num futuro breve, teremos grandes problemas relacionados com a qualidade de vida e saúde de toda a população mundial, devido a todos os hábitos que já praticámos no passado e muitos que ainda não praticamos, mas que começamos a praticar. Nesta circunstância, ter carros elétricos é muito interessante para diminuir a pegada do carbono, mas não sabemos o que é que devemos de fazer às suas baterias daqui a 15 anos. Devemos ter que as enterrar ou mandá-las para a Lua, eventualmente. Isso vai ter custos incomportáveis e não é uma solução duradoura. Nessa circunstância, e por esses motivos, temos tratados internacionais que deveriam ser respeitados na sua totalidade, e não só o Estado tem que fazer a sua parte, como também a população tem que ser consciente e respeitar todo o meio ambiente, sem exceção. Em Portugal, é possível observar uma grande preocupação com o meio ambiente e com a qualidade de vida de toda a população, e o Estado põe grandes metas para daqui a 10 anos começarmos a colher os bons frutos destas políticas públicas. Por vezes, os direitos humanos são tratados em conjunto com o direito ambiental. No entanto, não estão tão próximos como deveriam estar para que essa proteção seja realmente efetiva. Entretanto, mostraremos que existe uma relação mais próxima entre estes dois direitos, uma vez que não existem pessoas saudáveis no meio ambiente doente. Entendemos que os países da União Europeia são, nos próximos anos, aqueles que demonstrarão ser menos poluídos, porque todo o bloco europeu tem essa preocupação, e além de uma cultura de deixar o carro em casa, temos ainda que andar a pé, fazer uso do transporte público, andar de bicicleta, viver uma vida passo a passo, lado a lado, com a natureza. No direito ambiental em Portugal, o direito ao meio ambiente é um ramo jurídico que tem o objeto de disciplinar as atividades humanas que possam causar impacto ambiental, tanto como é principal foco defender o meio ambiente, preservando e melhorando dentro dos padrões de qualidade atual definidos para todos os seres humanos. Em Portugal, percebemos que esta preocupação aparece desde a Constituição da República, no seu artigo 9, linhas D e E, onde se observa o direito ao ambiente como uma tarefa fundamental do Estado. E aqui passo a citar. Artigo 9. Tarefas fundamentais do Estado. Promover o bem-estar e a qualidade de vida do povo e a igualdade real entre os portugueses, bem como a efetivação dos direitos económicos, sociais, culturais, ambientais, mediante a transformação e modernização das estruturas económico-sociais. So, and now jumping a little bit to the end, I think we are going to kind of a main event. I need my kind of little support. I think I heard it in here for not taking more of your time. So we can conclude that the climate change have a direct impact in human health. In highly polluted cities, children are even born with malformations. When it is very hot due to global warming, which is becoming increasingly noticeable by many cities, experiencing devastating wildfires that get into the wildness, to the city, to the actual houses, affecting homes, families, and harming people with respiratory problems. For the elderly, this is a problem who generally already have some difficulties on breathing, and everything ends to getting worse for everyone. Children and old people are most affected, but we are all affected long term by these fires, by the dioxide of carbon, by the global warmness around us. In other seasons of the year, we are faced with heavy rains and flood cities and destroy bridges. Bridges that were built hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And we see people losing their lives, losing their homes, losing their good health. All of this is a result of climate change, making it possible to observe its direct impact on human life and human rights every day. In our opinion, with regard to human rights, these do not always concern an individual cause. In most cases, there are collective causes, and as happens where we are victims of climate change, we need to have public policies for everyone. Policies that public can understand, policies that public can relate to, and policies that people can read on and can make it right for everyone. This may affect some people more severely than others, but in some way we are all affected. Environmental law is often seen as a very distant relative from human rights treaties, and that is not the case. Human rights are hand by hand with environmental protection. You need to protect the environment if you want to protect human rights and humans itself. And in a recent achievement, only recently, UN is to consider the right to the environment as a human right. This is a written testament that we need to do this and make people believe in it, because this is a recent achievement. Not always the UN considers human rights environmental law. So we need to make it normal because it is. So, in our view, this recognition should have happened many years ago, as it is a fundamental for human beings to have healthy environment with living fauna and flora. However, the European Court of Human Rights also does not make a direct connection between these two rights, and should make it right now. When in the end of this conference, reading our reflections, reading our book, our paper, the work of this community, the scientific committee, this university, we should tell European Court of Human Rights that this is a priority. So we are forgetting to bringing environmental law closer to human rights. If we were not aware of this right now, we are not damaging the environmental law. We are killing people in the future. So, in a brief commentary, perhaps I will have 2 minutes more, I think. Okay. And I'm going to end my presentation with the conclusion. Sorry for the Portuguese, but it's my native language. When I will be lecturing here, I will do it in my best English and perhaps a little Polish that I can study till then. Podemos concluir que todas as alterações climáticas impactam de forma direta na saúde dos seres humanos. Nas cidades que são muito poluídas, algumas crianças chegam a nascer com malformações quando se está muito calor devido ao aquecimento global, sendo que isso cada vez é mais perceptível nas cidades que têm queimadas e incêndios devastadores, atingindo mesmo casas de habitação, prejudicando pessoas que têm problemas de respiração, em princípio crianças e idosos, que geralmente já têm alguma dificuldade, e tudo acaba piorando nas estações do ano em que nos deparamos com seguidas chuvas fortes que alagam as cidades, destroem as pontes, onde vemos pessoas que perdem a vida, perdem a saúde, perdem a sua qualidade de vida, perdem também a confiança, e isto é tudo resultado das alterações climáticas e da não responsabilização que os humanos têm por não tomar conta do seu ambiente natural. Sendo possível observarmos o impacto direto e atual na vida de todos os seres humanos. Na nossa opinião, no que concerne aos direitos humanos, nem sempre estes se tratam de uma causa individual. E, na maioria das vezes, são sim causas coletivas. Como acontece quando somos vítimas de alterações climáticas, estas podem até afetar algumas pessoas de forma mais severa do que outras, mas são um problema de todos. E nessa circunstância, temos de estar todos juntos para proteger o direito humano ou o ambiente saudável, se queremos sobreviver no futuro. O direito ao meio ambiente é visto de uma forma distante dos direitos humanos, sendo uma conquista apenas recente da ONU considerar o direito ao ambiente como um direito humano. Esta conquista tem o nosso reconhecimento e, no nosso entendimento, devia já ter acontecido há muitos anos atrás. Porque é fundamental para todos os seres humanos ter um meio ambiente saudável, fauna e flora viva. No entanto, o Tribunal Europeu dos Direitos do Homem ainda não faz uma ligação completamente direta entre estes dois direitos. Estamos a esquecer de juntar e de aproximar o direito ao ambiente e ao ambiente saudável dos direitos humanos internacionais. Ao dizermos que queremos um ambiente saudável, estamos apenas a ser ecologicamente corretos. Para o nosso bem-estar e das futuras gerações, é necessário que estas questões entrem no judiciário para podermos dizer, em nossa defesa, que estamos a fazer alguma coisa e que, na realidade, que sustentamos os conceitos das leis e que a violação do direito humano ao ambiente é considerada uma violação à qualidade de vida e à vida em si. Dizendo sim, pelo contrário, a sustentada, que sem dúvida é uma violação da própria vida e dos direitos humanos, e se não estivermos a protegê-los, estamos a matá-los a todos. You're welcome for your presence. Thank you very much. I think I restricted my time. I'm very proud to be here. I hope I can back soon. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Professor João Xavier. Now I'm presenting the Professor Luiza Pierdoná from Presbiterian University of Brazil, of Mackenzie, São Paulo, Brazil. My colleague, my friend, after 10 years. Your issue is sustainability of social protection to guarantee future generations.
First, I would like to take the Inaction University for their hospitality and invitation. And I do so on behalf of teachers Marci Pianiacic and Marius Zalewski. I also want to thank you, our teacher Beata, for the warm welcome. Gracias. I also thank you, Iberjur, of behalf of my friend and the Professor Fabio Veiga. I would like to state that begin at this important university is a source of pride. I am a professor at Mackenzie University in São Paulo. I will be a pleasure to welcome you to our university. We have many descendants of Polish in Brazil, and so I felt at home here in Krakow. I understand that we cannot talk about sustainability only in the environment aspect, but also in the social and the economic aspect. I'm going to talk about the social aspect of sustainability, especially in relation to social protections. because at least in Brazil, there is little discussion about the sustentabilidade of protection. Unfortunately, I will be speaking in Portuguese because my English is not very good. Discute zaprozenie e descanse power time. Manatsis ze spoknat se in Brazil. Now I will speak in Portuguese. A Constituição brasileira, ela expressamente menciona sustentabilidade em 2 momentos. Então, expressamente. Em relação ao meio ambiente, e normalmente, quando se fala em sustentabilidade, se fala na questão ambiental da sustentabilidade, mas a Constituição também se preocupou com a sustentabilidade em relação à Previdência Social. Para os brasileiros, os portugueses que nos acompanham, em relação à sustentabilidade ambiental, a Constituição brasileira, no artigo 225, estabelece: todos têm direito ao meio ambiente ecologicamente equilibrado, bem de uso comum do povo e essencial à sadia qualidade de vida, impondo-se ao poder público e à coletividade o dever de defendê-lo e preservá-lo para as presentes e futuras gerações. Então, observem que, em relação ao meio ambiente, expressamente estabelece isso. Mas a Constituição também tem preceitos sobre a sustentabilidade em relação à Previdência Social. Eu gostaria de dizer que a Previdência Social no Brasil, ela está inserida dentro de um conjunto de direitos que a nossa Constituição adotou uma terminologia espanhola e não portuguesa, professora Rosário. Adotou o termo Seguridade Social e não Segurança Social. O termo Seguridade Social no Brasil, diferente da Espanha e diferente de Portugal, inclui, além da Seguridade Social Contributiva, que o Brasil chama de Previdência Social, a Seguridade Social não contributiva, que o Brasil chama de assistência social, e a saúde. Mas quando eu digo que o Brasil inclui na Seguridade Social a saúde, as pessoas pensam que apenas os trabalhadores e seus dependentes têm acesso à saúde. Não. Com a Constituição de 88, todos passaram a ter acesso à saúde, ela se tornou universal. A este conjunto de direitos, nós brasileiros chamamos de Seguridade Social. Ela é um pouco mais ampla que a Segurança Social da Espanha e um pouco mais... Não que a... Desculpe, a Segurança Social em Portugal não que não inclua a saúde universal, mas está fora, né? A mesma coisa em relação à Constituição Espanhola. Seguridade Social é previdência nossa, assistência e também a saúde está fora. Muito bem. Em relação à previdência, que é previsão social, a Constituição estabelece 2 regimes. O regime geral, que inclui todos os trabalhadores, menos os servidores públicos, e o regime dos servidores públicos, que estão em preceitos diferentes. Ambos os preceitos, e aqui eu trago, né, ambos os preceitos referem expressamente, e eu vou ler aqui para não ter dúvida, referem expressamente a necessidade de observância de critérios que preservem o equilíbrio financeiro e atuarial. Em relação ao regime geral, a Constituição diz: a Previdência será organizada sob a forma de regime geral, de caráter contributivo e de filiação obrigatória, observar os critérios que preservam o equilíbrio financeiro atuarial e atenderá. A mesma coisa, professor Fábio, em relação ao regime dos servidores. Quando a Constituição estabelece a necessidade de observância de critérios que preservem o equilíbrio financeiro e atuarial, ela está dizendo a mesma coisa que diz em relação ao meio ambiente, em outras palavras, que nós precisamos ter esse equilíbrio financeiro e atuarial para garantir proteção às gerações futuras. Infelizmente, no Brasil, se pensa muito em direitos. Aliás, eu tenho dúvida se é só no Brasil. Porque o professor Cassal Canabás, ele tem um artigo, que é professor de Coimbra, em homenagem ao meu companheiro de mesa, né? O professor João, ele tem um artigo em que ele começa dizendo: não está na moda falar dos deveres e do custo dos direitos. Aliás, nunca esteve na moda. E ele diz que isso é em especial na academia. Nós estamos aqui numa universidade, envolvendo várias universidades da Polônia, de Portugal, do Brasil, depois vai ter uma pessoa, uma professora dos Estados Unidos falando, tem argentinos também. Na academia, muitas vezes nós pensamos que as coisas surgem como varinhas mágicas, né? E isso é problemático, porque eu entendo que a universidade deve refletir sobre os problemas e dar respostas à sociedade. Então, eu dizia para vocês que a Constituição tem essa preocupação. E o que tem acontecido? Tem acontecido que nós estamos com uma legislação que, embora tenha tido 3 grandes mudanças, 3 grandes reformas na Constituição, porque, professora Rosário, diferente da Constituição portuguesa e da Constituição espanhola, que ela é bem sintética, em um artigo fala sobre a segurança social, e a espanhola, em um artigo, fala sobre a seguridade social, em outro artigo sobre saúde, nós temos 10 artigos para tratar da seguridade social. Para se ter uma ideia, quando a Constituição foi editada, tinha um artigo, o 202, que dizia como se calculava os benefícios previdenciários. É um absurdo isso estar na Constituição. E por conta disso que nós tivemos que ter 3 grandes reformas da Constituição. Mas, quando a Constituição ela estabelece essa proteção geral, ela diz: a Seguridade Social compreende um conjunto de ações de iniciativa dos poderes públicos e da sociedade. Não é só dos poderes públicos. E esses direitos se darão por meio da Previdência, da Saúde e Assistência. Inclusive, em relação à assistência, a Constituição brasileira estabelece a subsidiariedade. Antes eu tenho a proteção da família para depois ter a proteção do Estado. E muitas vezes isso não tem acontecido. Em relação à Previdência, a Constituição ela foi muito generosa. Ontem, no avião, quando vinha para cá de Madrid, uma pessoa me perguntava com que idade uma pessoa se aposentava no Brasil. E eu disse que até 2019, no regime geral, não tinha idade mínima. Tinha pessoas se aposentando com 40 e poucos anos, professora Rosário. Então, quando a Constituição permitiu isso e a legislação infraconstitucional ainda foi mais generosa, eles não estavam preocupados na proteção das futuras gerações. Eles estavam mais preocupados, talvez, que 4 anos depois teriam uma eleição e gostariam de ser eleitos. E, por isso, essa generosidade na legislação. Então, nós temos pessoas do Brasil, o Brasil, que é o 9º país mais desigual do mundo. A professora Rosário sabe disso, sabe as diferenças sociais. Ele tem isso, professora Rosário, que se aposentava com 40 e poucos anos, não era o trabalhador mais vulnerável. Até porque, no Brasil, nós temos uma informalidade que se aproxima de 40% dos trabalhadores. 40% dos trabalhadores da iniciativa privada no Brasil, eles estão na informalidade. Então, não recolhem previdência social. E alguns não recolhem e ficam na informalidade, querem ficar na informalidade, porque nós temos um sistema que ele não é adequado. Esse sistema que nós temos de proteção social, ele está embasado nos estudos feitos por uma comissão interministerial na Inglaterra, em 1941 e 1942, e quem presidiu essa comissão foi um professor universitário de economia, William Beveridge. E o William Beveridge dizia que todos os trabalhadores deveriam obrigatoriamente recolher para a Previdência, mas como nem todos recolheriam e nem todos seriam trabalhadores, teria que ter uma assistência social. E esta assistência, Beveridge dizia, professor Fabio, que ela deveria ser menos atrativa do que a proteção contributiva. E nós, no Brasil, temos uma prestação para os maiores de 65 anos e as pessoas com deficiência, que são vulneráveis economicamente, que o valor é igual ao piso da proteção contributiva. Então, tem muitas pessoas no Brasil que não aceitam estar formalizados, que não querem ter formalização. Por quê? Porque se eles têm formalização, eles vão ter, no mínimo, um desconto das contribuições. E eles não querem por quê? Eles não querem porque vão ter a mesma proteção. Mas não é só o sistema que ele eu tenho dito, esquizofrênico, ele é inadequado. E o Beveridge chamava a atenção. Ele dizia, professor Fábio, que a assistência tinha que ser menos atrativa, e no Brasil isso não ocorre. Mas nós temos, então, um sistema que ele é desconexo, embora tenha seguido as linhas, porque ele tem a previdência para todos os trabalhadores, que é obrigatório, mas nem todos contribuem, tem a assistência social, que é para atender os vulneráveis. No caso de prestações econômicas, a vulnerabilidade é econômica, mas no caso de outras vulnerabilidades, não. Então, imagine que eu seja vítima de violência doméstica. Eu posso ter um serviço da assistência social promovida pelo poder público. E a Constituição de 88 também garantiu a saúde para todos. E nós temos uma coisa muito positiva nos dias atuais, que é a longevidade. Só que a longevidade traz desafios muito grandes. Qual deles? Primeiro, pagar aposentadorias e pensões por um período maior. E segundo, a longevidade também gera gastos em relação à saúde. E nós temos questões tecnológicas, novos medicamentos surgindo todos os dias. Então, isso, são desafios. A longevidade é uma questão muito benéfica, mas que traz desafios em relação à sua sustentabilidade. Na Previdência, porque paga pensões mais longas. Na assistência, porque paga essa prestação não contributiva por mais tempo. E na saúde, por conta disso tudo. E é importante que nós tenhamos isso tudo. Estou terminando. Mas nós temos outros desafios muito que são desafios gerados por essa longevidade, por exemplo, cuidados das pessoas com dependências maiores, e que nós no Brasil não temos como cobrir. Por quê? Porque não tem recursos para isso. Então, quando a gente pensa em sustentabilidade da proteção social, muitas vezes nós temos que pensar, talvez até, em reduzir certas proteções para garantir outras que são mais urgentes, como há pouco eu citei, a questão da dependência para as pessoas maiores, que nós não temos essa proteção no Brasil, salvo para as pessoas que se aposentam por invalidez, que tem um adicional que é parecido com a Alemanha. Só que a Alemanha não é só para aposentadoria por invalidez. Enfim, professor, nesses 20 minutos, eu quero dizer, eu trouxe questões relacionadas aos direitos, mas eu poderia tratar do financiamento desses direitos. Inclusive, eu comentava com a professora Rosário que nós tivemos uma grande mudança no Brasil em relação a tributos, porque a partir do ano que vem nós já vamos ter, sendo efetivado com regras de transição, um IVA dual. Uma parte desse IVA, que é da União, será justamente para a Seguridade Social. E outro vai ser daí para os estados e municípios. Enfim, professor, esse tem sido um problema que eu tenho procurado trazer. Se eu apresentasse os números dos gastos orçamentários, as pessoas que não são do Brasil iriam se apavorar. O número que se gasta, nós, para ter uma ideia, nesse ano, no âmbito federal, 92% de todos os recursos que foram arrecadados foi para despesas obrigatórias. E aí nós queremos criar outras despesas, outros riscos a proteger. Eu queria, nesses minutos, trazer para vocês esse grande desafio que o Brasil tem, mas que não é só do Brasil, é do mundo inteiro, né? E nós temos que ter coragem de pensar isso e discutir e, quem sabe, propor aos nossos governantes, né, mudanças que garantam a proteção, não apenas atuais, mas as futuras gerações. Muito obrigada, professor Fábio, pelo convite. Eu quero dizer que o Iberojur tem aberto portas para todos nós, e agora para mim, inclusive na Polônia. Eu vou tentar agradecer agora de novo em polonês, vamos ver se eu consigo, né? Dziękuję za zaproszenie i serdecznie powitamy. Mam nadzieję, spotkamy się w Brasil. Thank you.
Dziękuję, professora. Dziękuję. Now we pass to the professor. I would like to introduce Professor Yuliya Guseva, Director of the Blockchain and Fintech Program at the Rutgers Law School, United States of America. Welcome to this panel, Professor Yuliya. Her lecture topic is Collateral, the major, how financial reforms pull investor demand and all protocols. Professor Yuliya. Can
Hello, everyone. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. I was playing with slides. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a privilege. Many thanks to Professor Zawudzki for inviting me, and he's my dear friend. So, Mariusz, thank you. It's really a pleasure. And before we begin, I would like to share the slides because I do have a slide presentation. I thought that would be more interesting to the audience, given that I'm unfortunately participating online and cannot be there in person with you in Poland. So let me open the slides. There we are. Can you see them?
Not yet. Not yet. Oh. Yes. Now, yes.
Fantastic. Okay. So I want us to switch gears a little bit and talk about not just sustainability and the environment, but how we can get unintended consequences. And I specifically would like to focus on crypto. As you know, I'm currently at Rutgers Law School, where I'm not only a professor of law, but also the director of the Fintech and Blockchain program. And by the way, it's an open secret. On Monday, I will be joining the faculty of the Florida State University College of Law, where I will continue working on financial technology and, of course, capital markets. So as an expert in finance and capital markets, I was thinking how we can impact the environment through financial regulation. And for better or for worse, we can. So the premise is of this talk is as follows. Let's think about economics and markets. Let's think about supply and demand incentives, which lead various market actors to participate in markets and market equilibria in terms of the prices and competitive versus non-competitive markets. Typically, what happens is, and there is some kind of acceptance of a new product by consumers and merchants. There is a new idea. Next comes the legal recognition of the idea, but sometimes governments can intervene and create distortions in the supply and demand picture. So let me take you back a few thousand years. So it will be a quick conversation, only a few thousand years of history. So let's think about what is money. And if we think about crypto assets like Bitcoin, technically, could it be money? So what is money? It could be anything, whatever we believe should be used as money. And of course, our ancestors created the barter system at some point, and later on, it was whatever we thought had value. So the market came up with some kind of consensus. And because of that consensus and the network effects, we got market demand for certain items, such as seashells. And obviously, as I'm sure we'll know, thousands of years ago, China was first to introduce replicas of goods serving as money in commercial transactions. Later in Lydia, the first European coins appeared. Now it's more than Turkey, of course. And only in the 13th century would we see those developments in Florence, specifically with the issuance, or rather minting of florin, the first golden coin, which became accepted across Europe. Then, a few hundred years fast forward, we got Marco Polo, who borrowed the Chinese idea of having paper money, and it spread across Europe. But only by the 17th century would we get the acceptance of paper money, starting obviously in Europe in the north. And the question was, why would the governments quickly adopt this system? Well, obviously, paper was cheaper than gold, but on the other hand, the governments would not be able to do that were it not for the demand for these means of payment, right? If you and I, or other ancestors rather, would not accept paper money, but they did. Now, funnily enough, in the United States, that wasn't the same story until the 20th century. So in the United States, starting in the 18th century, there were nationally and state chartered banks. So we have the so-called dual banking system in the United States, where some banks are chartered, meaning licensed by the states, others by the federal government. And the federal government licensing or charters were established only in the 19th century. So all those banks were issuing little notes, bank notes, literally, including banks in rural areas, very remote, called wildcat banks, with poorly financed banknotes, practically worthless. And the federal notes were printed in 1916 and obviously became a form of money, or the form of money, the US dollar, the greenback. Also, for about half a century, in the 19th century, United States citizens, well, residents, of course, and the others could trade dollars for gold. But as we all know, in the 20th century, the gold standard was abandoned, including in the United States. So this is a combination, what we see especially in the United States and previously, before paper money in Europe, we see a combination of market supply and demand, market innovation through commerce for the most part. In 1946, something interesting happened at the heart of Manhattan. John Biggins created the first credit card, which worked within a couple of blocks in Manhattan. But today, obviously, we got Visa, we got MasterCard, and they can be combined with crypto. So Visa and MasterCard are also experimenting with other technologies. But it all dates back to this gentleman back in 1946. So this brings us to the development of blockchains and Bitcoin in particular. And I would like to focus on Bitcoin per se, because it's very relevant to this talk and the question of sustainability. So first, we started with the premise that money and various means of exchange and financial assets were created through supply and demand with the support or through the agencies of the government. And this brings us to Bitcoin. Obviously, we have to trace the history of Bitcoin back to 1977, when several MIT professors developed new algorithmic systems protecting confidentiality, authenticity of information, and that laid the foundation for Bitcoin. So later on, we know that that innovation didn't take root for at least 30 years. Instead, we got with the rise of the internet, of course, we got PayPal, we got eBay, but PayPal, dating back almost 26 years ago, now also launched its own stable coin, meaning a crypto asset having stable value and pegged to the US dollar. It happened only a couple of years ago. So we see old players entering into new fields. And approximately at the same time, a little bit before such large players as PayPal entered the scene, we got Bitcoin, which dates back to the white paper published by the anonymous Satoshi Nakamoto. And I'm sure you've heard of that person or persons. We don't know who they were. And what we see here, we see a private actor or actors responding to the failure of the government during the financial crisis, and I'm sure all of us remember the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, and creating a potentially new currency or a potentially new form of money. And remember, money could be anything, starting with seashells or gold, bars of gold. Now, the problem with Satoshi Nakamoto's idea was that the whole system, which algorithmically and cryptographically dates back to 1977, when those MIT professors developed it. But unfortunately, it also relies on the system called proof of work, meaning a lot of computers called nodes working on solving complex mathematical puzzles to add new bundles of transactions called blocks to a virtual chain. So they can be recorded there. They can be authenticated, they can be verified and added in this immutable chain so that we can trace all transactions going back to the Genesis transaction in 2009. Unfortunately, it all consumes a lot of electricity cost, and we'll get back to that in a second. Because as an aside, I want to mention what we have with other cryptocurrencies. Most of them distance themselves from proof of work or POW. And instead, they moved to proof of stake, proof of authority sometimes, and other systems. A proof of stake would basically require whoever wants to validate and authenticate the transactions, they would simply deposit a certain amount of cryptocurrency and get skin in the game. In case they misbehave, that currency would be taken away from them. Obviously, you're not using electricity to do that, or a very small amount compared to proof of work, where you have to solve a very complex mathematical puzzle and have multiple computers running 24/7, or ASICs and GPUs as well. So a lot of cryptocurrencies, or we should call them crypto assets, because some of them are like currencies or purport to be currencies, others are not. They just don't follow that, which reduces their environmental impact. And again, as an aside, there are multiple applications. Payments would be one, but we can record transactions on blockchains. Yuliya sells, I don't know, computers to Mariusz, and Mariusz pays Yuliya on everything is recorded on blockchain. We can also share data. Guseva sends to Zelia certain types of data, or let's say PhD dissertation or something like that, which is encoded. We can trade securities. We take, let's say, Volvo, shares of stock of Volvo or any other company. We tokenize them. It's a form of an asset secured by cryptography, a token. It lives on blockchain, but it represents a share of stock. We can trade it there, etc., etc. We can track goods, services, authenticate them, establish origin, or we can get a deed to our house in an electronic form, and it would also live on blockchain. So there are various applications of the technology, but that's not what I want us to focus on. I want us to focus specifically on POW. Actually, it also stands for prisoners of war, but I mean proof of work, as it's used in the Bitcoin blockchain. So funnily enough, 15 years ago, on May 22nd, 2010, a computer programmer paid 10,000 Bitcoins to get 2 large pizzas. The price of Bitcoin a couple of months ago was $100,000 per Bitcoin. Imagine how much that person lost several years ago. But that shows you that the first use of Bitcoin in a commercial transaction was 15 years ago. Now, the problem with cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin is that they're exceptionally volatile. And as one of the leading scholars at NYU, NYU Stern Business School, Professor David Yermak wrote several years ago, and I think it's still valid, is that you need to have a currency which serves as a medium of exchange, can store value, and serve as a unit of account. If you take Bitcoin, it's a very poor unit of account. If we look at the prices of not just Bitcoin, but many cryptocurrencies, which are not pegged to the euro or the US dollar, so they don't have stable value. Everything else is very volatile, and prices change within seconds considerably. You cannot use it as a unit of account in transactions. If you're a lawyer, you cannot be paid a retainer in Bitcoin. It's very hard to measure the value. It's hard to pay taxes based on how much we hold or sell those cryptocurrencies. And for merchants, it's a nightmare. So according to David Yermak, and I tend to agree with him, it's not a currency. So Satoshi Nakamoto thought it should be an alternative to the current financial system and the money as we know it today and back in 2008 after the financial crisis. But no, it's more like a speculative investment rather than a currency. And over the years, it became highly correlated with the stock market. So we can't even hedge against the stock market here. And more importantly, I think the values rise with the expansion in monetary policies. So if the Fed or the European Central Bank lower the interest rates, we will see different prices for Bitcoin, etc., etc. So it is fully embedded within the investment system, but it's hardly a speculative investment system at that. But it's hardly a stable or appropriate form of money for various forms of transacting. And more importantly, I think the Bitcoin power demand, the last time I checked, was anywhere between 20 to 25 large nuclear reactors. So we're fueling a speculative investment by using a lot of electricity, which I think is a problem. Now, what else are we doing there? I want you to take a look at this quote from Yahoo Finance. The mining market is forecasted to reach, well, a lot of money by 2026, pretty soon. Moreover, some sources suggest, and I think you will like that because the conference is physically in Poland, the consumption of electricity associated with Bitcoin currently is very similar to what the whole country of Poland consumes. Carbon emissions are through the roof, comparable to those of the Czech Republic. Now, unfortunately, when we're setting policies, including policies for speculative investments such as Bitcoin, we may create negative externalities for the environment without thinking about those negative externalities and perhaps pursuing legitimate or sometimes questionable other goals unrelated to the environmental footprint. Now, you remember this gentleman, I'm sure. Several years ago, he signed an executive order on digital assets, not just Bitcoin, all sorts of digital assets, where the previous administration expressed a pretty cautious approach to digital assets, emphasizing their risks, the potential for crypto assets to be used for money laundering, exploring environmental concerns, and others. And this gentleman was the previous chair of the US Securities and Exchange Commission, which is the largest in the world watchdog for all capital markets, all securities markets. And the position of Gary Gensler was pretty negative and skeptical. He called crypto the Wild West, emphasized fraud and illegality, and initiated a lot of enforcement actions. Switching gears, in 2025, the situation changed completely. Starting with the SEC, there are almost no enforcement actions, multiple actions have been dismissed, and that changed the environment for crypto assets, including developers, computer coders, developing crypto assets, as well as investors in crypto assets and firms investing in crypto assets. Well, we all know who this person is. President Trump, almost immediately after being sworn into office, he reversed the order issued by President Biden. And a couple of months later, in March this year, he issued another order, which is very relevant to Bitcoin specifically. Now, not other crypto assets operating on this less environmentally harmful proof of stake, but rather Bitcoin operating on proof of work, which requires a lot of electricity. So if you take a look at a quote from the summary of this order, the US has created a strategic Bitcoin reserve, capitalized with whatever has been seized from various illegal actors and criminal activities in the past, and they will consider whether to invest in Bitcoin in the future. So what is going on? We see a huge and radical change in 2025. By the way, the change, obviously, perhaps not so obviously, but at least there is a timing component, is associated with the change in cryptocurrency prices. So the question is, for lawyers and for academics, is to what extent do these policies support Bitcoin specifically and Bitcoin prices? What do we see? We see implicit and explicit political recognition. We need to explore how it affects the prices, how it creates incentives for various market actors participating in this Bitcoin ecosystem. What we do know, and I haven't run event studies to support any of those ideas, and also event studies give us pretty short-term information before and after a specific event, like a president signing an order. Instead, we can look at this brand new development. Well, not that new. It has become very popular recently, but it has been going on for a few years. So we are generating a lot of demand for Bitcoin. And I wanted to mention this article in the Financial Times discussing various firms which issue shares of stock to investors in order to take this capital and invest it in Bitcoin and other crypto assets. But we're particularly interested in Bitcoin, I think, because it is associated with a tremendous impact on the environment and consumption of electricity. The whole country of Poland could be using that electricity. What we see is that regulatory developments and policy statements, as well as the creation of a strategic reserve, may affect the market. For one, they support the Bitcoin mining industry, meaning those they're called mining farms. Because in the past, one could have a powerful computer and solve that complex mathematical problem, add transactions to the blockchain in a block, and win a reward, right? Or be compensated for performing this work. Now you need a whole farm of computers. And this is what consumes a lot of electricity. And those farms are actually firms, meaning that many are listed on exchanges, many have multiple investors, issue equity, etc. And we're supporting the mining industry. And since the assets are being legitimized, since we have this rise in prices, a lot of newcomers are entering the market. And this creates a very competitive environment with pretty thin margins. So where will it go? And I would like to finish this presentation with a question, because I didn't know how to address those problems. I'd rather emphasize a critical issue. We are creating unintended consequences for the environment by intervening in what used to be a completely private market. Now, what else happened in the United States? In the summer of this year, the Genius Act was passed. It addresses stable coins, that special type of crypto assets which hold stable value. They also exist in Europe under MiCA, the Markets in Crypto Asset Regulation. And MiCA was promulgated, if memory serves, in 2022, 2023. So it is just kicking into full gear this year. But in the United States, the act was signed into law in July this year. Currently, before the Senate, we have the Market Infrastructure Act, which would provide a regulatory framework for all sorts of crypto assets, which are not stablecoins, so for the majority of them. It is based on the bill passed by the House this summer, but unfortunately, the Senate couldn't agree on the version of the bill, so it is still pending. And last time I heard that the senators were hoping to continue deliberations into 2026. So we think that this new movement, first at the presidential level, at the White House level, and now in the Senate and the House, meaning Congress, will further support crypto. It may create more structured market regulation, but I'm not sure that we understand what the effect on the environment per se will be. Now, to conclude, we're dealing with law and regulation which are economic variables. We are intervening into private markets, which creates unintended consequences for the environment by reducing or creating demand, by impacting market prices, by increasing profit margins and incentives of the firms. We are sustaining whole industries, like the mining industry. And the question is, why are we doing that? If, as some economists like David Yermak suggested, Bitcoin and maybe some other cryptocurrencies are more speculative investments, is it worth it? And I would like to leave us all with this question and open the floor for the debate. And let me stop sharing now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Proença. Your topic was through Thursday, and we are now closing this panel because the time is finished. I would like to thank all the speakers for their excellent presentations. I'm now handing over the coordination of this panel to Professor Marcin Piesnik. Thank you very much.